Yeah, Jenna had a great question. If you're leading a group, and especially if the group is online, how would you know who's being triggered?
Yeah. Jenna, hey, Sean, do you mind? Can we bring people on or just give them that option?
Absolutely. Yeah. Jenna, would you like to
Sure.
unmute yourself?
Yeah, no pressure. If for folks that write questions, like we can always just read them too. But
yeah, so I'm a trauma therapist. I'm a psychotherapist. I do EMDR and some other work, and so we do work with this window of tolerance. I call it the resilience zone. But if we're doing a group, especially online, like how would I know?
Yeah, totally. Anyone got that figured out? If so, can you just jump on right now? I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I feel like I had this whole model, and then people are like, "But then, what do we do online? Like, how do we actually pull this off?" So I have a couple thoughts and suggestions. So one is just it's hard. I mean, I have teachers that I'm working with who are saying, "Well, some folks are on camera and some folks are not. How do I actually do it?" The number one thing that I've seen depends on the number. Two main suggestions. Is it Jenna or Gina, by the way?
Jenna.
Jenna, great. So, Jenna, what are the size of the groups out of curiosity that you're working with?
So I am currently just working one-on-one, and I'm developing a course in, it's called Unshakable Resilience.
Cool.
So yeah, so I will be working with, I would imagine 8 to 10 people, maybe upwards of 30 once I get used to it.
Okay, great. That's where, that to me is when at some point, when we're getting to like 20 or 30, it definitely becomes harder because I think groups of 10, we'll have often more people on screen that we can see. And so size does matter, I think, when it comes to this issue of online. You know what I'm going to do, Sean? I'll address this, Jenna, here. And then what would be great? Why don't we'll flesh out some of the questions that are here instead of just doing a Q&A right now. So I see some questions coming in. So let's just like table a bunch and then we can decide where we want to go. But Jenna, since this is big for everyone, we'll talk about it. Mm-hmm. Two things. One is having some kind of assessment tool that you can use in the chat can be very useful. Mm-hmm. So I will use, I wonder if I have it here. Let me see if I have it. Yeah, I do. So here's one thing that I work with in terms of the window. And it looks like this. Here we go. So I work with something called an arousal scale, which maps pretty well over to the window of tolerance. And of course, this is subjective. You could think of this like pain scales inside of healthcare, where it's a subjective measure for the practitioner, what doctor, nurse, whoever, to try to get a sense of someone's inner world and where they are in terms of pain. But we're mapping this over here to the window of tolerance. And in this case, a 1 on the window would be in more hypoarousal, and a 9 or a 10 would be more in hyperarousal. So if you've introduced the window to a group or a client, we're always looking for ways that we can, ideally in a quick way, have some sort of assessment about where people are in their window. Now, that's useful for both you as a practitioner, but it's also going to be useful for them as they build that competency to be able to go, where am I right now? So actually, I'll invite you all into a really brief practice for a moment, is invite you to check in with yourself. Where would you place yourself right now on the window? Again, you could do that with your eyes open or closed. But often we require mindfulness to just notice, well, where am I in my window? Am I more, if it's numerical, am I more towards like a 1, 2, 3 in hypoarousal? Am I at the higher end? If I'm in the middle, where am I? And then I invite you to notice, what was the information that told you that that's where you are in your window? Because that can also be useful information, like, oh, it's sensations, or it's the quality of thoughts that I have. So that's all to say, if I've introduced the window to a group, working with an arousal scale by number can be very helpful because you can actually utilize the chat. So a number of trauma-sensitive teachers that I know and work with and trained are using an arousal scale between 5 and 10. So with 5, it would be 3, 3, I'm in my window. 1 to 10, 5 is when you're in the window. And what they'll do is at the beginning of a session, in the middle, and at the end, or pick and choose where you want to have it, they'll ask people to self-report where they are in their window of tolerance. And that can be a helpful gauge and measure for a teacher to say, okay, well, my group is really hyper aroused, or maybe there's one person who was a 1, or that's a flag for me. So that's one option, is that you can work with an arousal scale. Again, all to try to have some kind of self-report measure and assessment. And then, Jenna, another piece around that would be, do people know that they can contact you, or for any of us, after a session? So I let people know if anything came up for you where you felt really dysregulated in the window, please let me know, so that I can make sure I'm connecting with resources or anything like that. So I make sure that people know that the channel is open to me. And then the final thing is, if you can have a second facilitator at some point, that's awesome. Even if you have a person in the group who is in a kind of pseudo role as facilitator, ideally, like Sean and I here, in some ways, we're kind of co-holding the group. I'm trying to track everyone, but it may be that there was someone that I wasn't seeing who appeared to have a response to something, or there's something in the chat that I missed. Having a second facilitator is huge. The more trauma work I'm doing, the more I'm seeing, oh, wow, they're catching things. Sometimes they'll have one-to-one back and forth with people. Someone doesn't want to disclose something, but they know that Sean's here and they can have a one-to-one with Sean. And so those are the two, and it's not the same, as being in person where we're kind of tracking people in a different way. But the self-report measures and then having a second person are the two that I'd say. So how's that land, or anything you want to add to that?
That's great. And actually, and it would be pretty simple to have that second facilitator and giving somebody the program, that is aware of this, so that sounds really great.
Cool. Great.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear about the course. That's awesome.
I feel a sense of calm.
Okay, good. Good. Let's head in that direction. That's good to hear. Thanks, Jenna.